All right, here we go. Today is the 7th of Adar, which is the birth and the Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Our learning today, which will be Lekavod Purim, is for Refuah Shlema for Shmuel Simcha ben Freda and for Chaim Velvel ben Esther Malka, very appropriate name. Actually, my name is Esther Yehudis because I was born on Hanukkah. That's the Yehudis part, but named after Esther. So I just said to my father, like, what do those two ladies have in common? Seriously. They both killed the most powerful person. Anyway, let me tell you about the next few weeks. First of all, for everybody, two things. To get the handouts by email so that you can see all the sources for our shir, you need to email, for everybody out there, tanyahammer@gmail, TANIAHAMMER@gmail. Another thing, if you have questions on this shir and you'd like to ask me a question, and I don't mean questions like, why did God do this to me? Okay, questions like, which pasuk says that, or what did you mean by this? Then feel free to email me at EST, the first three letters of my name, Esther, EST, Wein, WEIN, @gmail. Okay? Big, philosophical questions too are good, but no, as of yet, I am not admitting to prophecy, and I can't explain why God is doing certain particular things. However, we will talk about today the general concept of optimism and encountering and reacting to everything Hashem does in a positive way. Now, in terms of my schedule, so next week is Thursday, Purim. We're not having class, obviously, unless you all want to come to my class in my house, and we'll have a class there. And then the following Thursday, I'm en route to a very exciting adventure. I will be speaking at what is called Sinai Indaba in South Africa. And that is a big convention where they bring in interesting speakers from around the world. And it's a two weekend program. The first weekend is in Johannesburg. The second weekend is in Cape Town. Baruch Hashem, I'm making this into a 2-week trip. We're also going to go on safari and stuff like that in between. So it should be very exciting. And that will be, so the first Thursday is Purim, the next Thursday I'm leaving to South Africa, the next Thursday I'm in South Africa, and the next Thursday at 6:40 a.m. I will be returning Emet Hashem here. Now, being that it's a huge 15-hour flight, there's a very good chance with the help of Ambien that I will sleep through it, and I will actually be able to give the share that day. So that will be the 22nd. So you were basically off for sure for 3 weeks, if maybe for keep an eye on your email on the 22nd to see what will happen, okay? 22nd of March, okay? 3 weeks. Okay, so here we go. Our theme today is irony and harmony in the Purim relationships, and our theme is also Moshe Rabbeinu, being that, as you see, it's the Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. So in order to introduce the whole concept, we need a general framework in which to operate. And the framework is going to be a focus on the word, and we've done this before, but we're taking it deeper. A focus on the word Tov, good, and Ohr, light. Okay. Now, those two words appear together in the Chumash right in the beginning. What am I talking about? Go on. And Tov. Careful. Vayar Elokim es ha'or ki tov. That's it. Vayar Elokim es ha'or ki tov. Ohr is Tov. Now, what does Tov mean? We have been working with this. It's fundamental. That this is like automatic answer. The Ramban says Tov means it's permanent. It's sustainable. Now let's understand that further. We've explained Rav Moshe Shapiro many times, tells us that Ra, as opposed to Tov, is used, for example, as the root of the word Ra'ua. So for example, Kisei Ra'ua would be a chair that's no good, because guess what? It only has 3 legs. It doesn't function as a chair. The fact is that it's not suitable to sit on. Ra means it's not suitable. It's ra'ua. A shaky ladder is a sulam ra'ua. Whereas tov means it is suitable for your function, and therefore, if you know what your function is, you know what is suitable for your function and what is not suitable for your function. Hashem tells us that too. And if it is suitable for your function, if it's tov, it is Ohr and it is permanent. It is light. It makes you feel that warm and confident feeling that we even experience in physical light. And we know that there is direct correlation between light and optimism. In countries that are dark, there are many more suicides. Ohr is something that we relate to, and of course that's just physical Ohr. And a deeper level Ohr is enlightenment, meaning that, put it all together, if we know what our function is, then if we behave in a way that is suitable and consistent with our function, that will last permanently, that is forever, that is eternal, and that will ultimately allow us, and even in the moment and beyond the moment, to experience a sense of great satisfaction and a sense of connection and a sense of understanding. It all goes together, okay? Now, remember this, Aristotle, in the age of Greece, we talked about this last week, using Chachma, unfortunately closing the door on the earlier phase of history, which for us was a state of intuitive knowledge of God through the Nevi'im and Nisim, remember this? Adding on to that, we included then our Chachma and the capacity to explore the world. And what we discovered through our Chachma and Hashem's allowing us through Ruach HaKodesh, meaning epiphanies and moments of enlightenment, that were in sync, that were working with our Chachma, we were able to discover truths, incredible truths in math and in physics and in all kinds of ways through the physical world and through logic and through abstract thinking. We were able to discover all kinds of incredible truths and ideas that confirmed what we already knew and elaborated on what we already knew. But on the other side, there was Greece, and they said, what we already knew is probably fantasy and nonsense, so we won't go back there. Let's start now and discover what this world is really all about and what a human being is really all about. And this went in many, many, many directions. And as we said, the big question of philosophy is, what sort of being am I? And Aristotle said, well, we can't know. First, we have to know what sort of being we are. That's number one. Number two question is, how shall I operate? How shall I live? Meaning, what should I do? What's good for me and what's bad for me? And Aristotle said you can't know what's good or bad for you unless you know what your function is. And there was a big exploration. So the Greek word for function is ergon, remember this? And we always gave the example, let's say a steak knife. What is the function of a steak knife? It's a cut. So what would make it, what qualities would a steak knife have to be good? And vice versa, to be a bad steak knife, dull. But what about a butter knife? What's its function? Spread. So what would make it a good knife? Dull and flat, okay? Now, we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu here has already associated Ohr and Tov. The next time we see, turn to page 8, this idea of Tov Ma'od, the first time we see Tov Ma'od is what? In where? Page 8?
Page what?
Page 8 in Chumash. After the creation of man, okay? Man in chapter 1 is Tselem Elokim, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'od. Man in relationship to the world, where man knows what we are, that we are Tselem Elokim. Man in his identity as Tselem Elokim is tov ma'od. Very, very good. Meaning man has the capacity to operate in sync with our function. And when mankind operates in sync with our function, we feel good. It's in harmony with our function. It makes sense. It works. And it is a source, it gives us a sense of, you might say, that positive sense of connection, enlightenment. It's all about being in sync, being in harmony with who we really are. Now,
I'm sorry to interrupt. The thing that's bothering me here is the word permanence that you use.
Yes, Ramban, because if okay, very good. Let me clarify that. Elaborate on that. The human being in Perek Aleph who is Tov Ma'od, okay. Again, the human being as Tselem Elokim is a permanent creature. Our physical, and it's eternal creature. Our physical life here is not permanent, obviously, but our existence as a Tselem Elokim, a partner with God, is absolutely permanent. If we live in sync with our function, then our existence continues eternally.
But the knife isn't always sharp. It can be not sharp, and we cannot be good.
We're going to talk about that today, of course. But all we know is of course we can operate in a way that is in violation of our essence, which means we would be doing something that is not suitable for who we are. And we would feel that it doesn't work and it's out of sync and there's no harmony. We would feel it.
Right.
Just so, we'll get there. The next time you see Tov, for today, our focus is that there's somebody who was born, whose birthday it is today, who when he was born, he was called Tov. Turn to page 296. Okay? Perek Beis and Shemos, Psukim Aleph and Beis. Vatahar ha'isha v'teled ben, she got pregnant, she gave birth to a son, v'tera oso ki tovu. She's just the same, v'yar likim ki tov. She saw, same formula, ki tovu, he was tov. And what did we know from Chazal? Exactly, how did she know he was tov? Here comes the connection to light. The house was filled with light, correct? Here we are, ki tovu. Look at Rashi, kishanolad. Nismale habayis kulo ora. The whole house was filled with light when he was born. So you see again, Moshe, light and good. Alrighty? Now, here we go. Good is being in sync with our function, and bad is being out of sync with our function. Okay? There's this idea that something, when it exists in sync with our function, it just feels right. Okay? Is not, unfortunately, something that's always automatic. But when we look at a whole story, we'll look at the Purim story for a minute, and you see that there is a relationship, a very ironic relationship, but a relationship between all the moving parts of the story that in the end are entirely harmonious, then in the end that entire episode is totally in sync with the function of existence and the function of Am Yisrael. Now, look at the elements in the Purim story in terms of relationships. Okay? And why we're talking about relationships is because Tov is in a relationship to Ohr. When it's Tov, when it's suitable, when it's in sync with our purpose, it creates Ohr. It creates Ohr.
Papers, there was something that
What? What do you need?
the photocopy, there were some papers that weren't yours.
Oh, there were some papers that weren't ours that got stuck into the pile?
Yes.
Anybody see any strict?
It would be on that part when it started over here.
Okay, sorry, Tor. Thank you. And thank you every week for doing our copies. Okay, Tov is in a relationship to Ohr, and we are in a relationship with Tov, and in the end, the world operates you could look at it almost musically or as a mathematical equation. Every single thing that ever happened in all of history is in a relationship with everything else, and the sum total of all the many, many parts of the enormous equation is always going to be one. Echad, the one truth. You see this in the Purim story. Let's just look at human relationships intersecting in the Purim story. Okay? And the harmony between them all at the end that we get to see. And when we get to see it, La'ihudim Haisa Ora. Okay, and today, Purim, 7th of Adar, Haman was very happy that he cast his lots, and it came out in the month of Adar because it's a bad month for the Jews. It's the last month of their year, the end. And Moshe died. Must be really bad. We're going to explain that Moshe also was born on this day. And so Moshe being Tov and Ohr and the whole story, and in the end, Lahudim HaSa'ora, it's all part of one equation. Now let's look at all the parts of this equation that we don't get to understand how they work together until the very end. There is a relationship between Haman and Esther, okay, that he has absolutely no idea about, sadly for him. The relationship is that he has a great-great-grandfather called Agag. Okay, and Agag is the chief Amaleki, and there was a king at the time that Agag lived called Shaul, and Shaul was supposed to wipe out Amalek, and Shaul didn't finish the job. In the end, Shaul's head was cut off by an Amaleki. Again, the equation balances in the end when he actually died. But Shaul doesn't finish the job. Okay, Haman, with his own purposes in mind of self-promotion, he had a nemesis in the story. There was a woman in his way called Vashti. She was the heiress to the throne. Her grandfather was Nebuchadnezzar. Her husband was Achashverosh. There was an opportunity to eliminate Vashti. And so therefore, Achashverosh would have no greater legitimacy than Haman in the end to the throne. So he seizes his opportunity and gives Achashverosh the great advice to get rid of Vashti, opening the position of queen up. Now, little does he know that Shaul happens to have a great-great-granddaughter who happens to be living right next door. And now that Achashverosh decides he needs a new queen, which is Haman's advice, okay, Hashem creates an interesting relationship between Achashverosh and Esther. He's completely besotted, in fact, enamored with Esther. And Haman essentially facilitated that Shaul's great-great-granddaughter takes the throne to finish the job. He has no idea that his relationship with Esther, what that is. He absolutely doesn't. Now, Achashverosh and Esther have a relationship which is very one-sided. Esther doesn't want to be there, but Achashverosh wants her to be there. She doesn't even know why he likes her and why she's being put into this position. Why is this relationship blossoming? She really prefers not. Esther and Mordechai have a relationship which they keep secret from Achashverosh and from Haman. And that relationship is a very important relationship. Obviously, Mordechai guides her and leads her, and they work together. She tells Mordechai what to do, he tells her. And by the way, Haman says, we better legislate the relationship between men and women in this country. All women must obey the men, the husbands. He tries, okay? Achashverosh has an interesting relationship with Haman. Well, for Haman, it's a power play. He's really trying to take Achashverosh's position. And he's very, what is important to him is his being able to ingratiate himself with Achashverosh. And he seems to think that he's being very successful. However, there's another relationship working here, which is Haman and Mordechai. Haman and Mordechai don't have a functional relationship. Haman is very angry at Mordechai, and he used to work for him according to the Medrash. Mordechai will not bow down to Haman. Haman is going to kill Mordechai and all his people. The problem is that Haman's relationship with Achashverosh and Mordechai's relationship with Achashverosh collide, because when Bigsan and Seresh, who Hashem created a situation where they'll be annoyed at the king and decide to poison him, and you'll see in the sources, this is compared to the fact that Hashem created discord between Paro, got anger, right, between Paro and the baker and the winemaker, in order for Yosef to be able to interpret the dreams. So to here, Hashem decided to facilitate things so that Bigsan and Seresh will get angry at the king, so that Mordechai will overhear the conversation and report it to the king. Now, there's a whole big love triangle going on here, because Achashverosh decides one night that he actually owes something to Mordechai, that there's unfinished business. That's the same time Haman's deciding to come to Achashverosh with the great idea to destroy Mordechai. Haman and Achashverosh's lovely relationship, their cozy relationship, is unfortunately disturbed by the fact that Achashverosh now has an allegiance to Mordechai, which gets in the way. And that changes the relationship of Haman's wife and daughter and wise men to Haman, who now see he's in trouble. Okay? Eventually, Esther's relationship with Achashverosh causes him to do what is very unexpected, and he says, whatever you want, no one's allowed into the king's presence without an invitation, but you have so much chen, and you can come and ask me anything you want. And she capitalizes on that, obviously, and invites him to the party. And then we all know what happens. She obviously gets in between Achashverosh and Haman in a serious way. She identifies him as her arch enemy, then talks about who she is to Mordechai, and then we know the whole story, how it unfolds, and we say, oh my goodness, how all these relationships under the surface and on the surface, all intersecting with each other to ultimately complete the story, all the parts of this equation total in the end one echad, one simple truth. Now, the truth, what is the great truth of the Purim story? The great truth of the Purim story is Hashem is behind everything. The Jewish people cannot be destroyed. We are going to recommit to the Torah under all circumstances, and no one is going to ultimately be successful in sabotaging that. We talk about this all the time. There is a lot of irony in the stories we talked about. Remember Nakama and irony? We won't go back to that. And there's a lot of harmony in the end in this story. And harmony, as we said, is a type of beauty. And when we talk about harmony, we're talking about in sync with our function, in sync with what the real truth is. And you see it played out in this story. We feel it when something, as we said, is in sync. We might not feel it at the moment. Each moment, no, you don't see. We do not get to see how the particular situation that we're in right now is going to relate to all the other variables in this equation. Esther doesn't even know why she's the queen. And Big Sam Teresh have no idea. And Haman has no idea about his relation with Esther. Nobody knows in the moment what the ultimate formula, what the ultimate equation looks like. And nobody gets to realize fully until often later on the relationship of one incident in their life or one connection in life with another. Now, you could probably all think back over your lives and ask yourselves, was there an incident or an experience or a connection that happened in my past that is the direct reason or cause of something now in my life? So let me tell you a story. I think I did this actually. Did I tell you the Pelioid story? Okay, so here's a little story. When I was, my first Gilgal, I was an ultrasound tech. And then we lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and eventually my parents all moved to Muncie. I was commuting back and forth to my job in Elizabeth, and eventually it became a pain to commute, so I quit. So then I didn't yet have a job in Muncie, and this is way before my teaching years. And, this is where it really started. And there was a school there called Netzach Yisrael, which was for Chozrot B'Tshuva, and I figured, let me volunteer there to tutor. And I got set up with a girl at the time, became a good friend of mine, named Renee Levin, whose name today is Shoshana Bander. Anyway, she told me that she knew that she had a really, really important great-grandfather who was a big rabbi somewhere back there, in the 1700s. So we went on a mission to figure out who her great-grandfather was, and to make a long story short, we discovered that her great-grandfather was someone known as the Pele Yoetz. Now, the Pele Yoetz is known because he wrote a book. I don't actually even remember his real name, but he wrote a book called the Pele Yoetz. It's a very nice book, a beautiful bar mitzvah type book. It takes all Jewish concepts and it alphabetizes them. Like under Aleph would be Ahava, Achdus, Eretz Yisrael, that kind of thing. And then Beis, give them all Jewish concepts. And so of course, we decided we're going to learn the Pele Yoetz together. And she didn't have any relatives that she knew of far and wide that were religious or coming back to religion. Like the family was lost. So now not so much through her. Baruch Hashem, there's been a lot of advancement in the family and thank God, connection to Yiddishkeit. So, of course I wondered, why am I learning with the great-granddaughter, the one and only one who's religious, of the Pele Yoetz, the one who's returning? So at some point, I was talking to my grandfather, Zechrono Livracha, who's Yartzeit, and we're going to get to an amazing story from my grandfather a little later, because his Yartzeit is Purim, and 23rd Yartzeit. And I said to him, Appa, why do you think No, I didn't say that. I said, Appa, it's amazing. Can I just, I'm learning with the great-granddaughter, great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of the Pelioites. I just feel like it's such a chassan. We're learning Pelioites. He goes, I said, it's just amazing. He goes, it is amazing. And let me explain to you why you're learning with the great-great-granddaughter of the Pelioites. My grandfather was born in 1908. This was he died in 1995. It was probably 1990. No, I got married in 90. It was before. It was in the 1980s. So, late 1980s, probably 1989 or something. Anyway, so he said to me, see, in 1915, maybe till, in 1920, in Frankfurt, Germany, the Reform movement was just wreaking havoc. It was the seat of the Reform movement. And my great-grandfather, Yehuda Leib Schwab Zechrono Livracha, didn't know what to do. He felt he had to do something about the fact that all of his friends, not all, but many of his friends' children from the Kehillah of Torah true families, their children were just abandoning Judaism. They were being Machal Shabbos, playing soccer. And he felt he had to do something. So he figured, he had young children, these were young boys. He was going to every Shabbos to make a Shalosh Shudas in his home and have treats and good food, invite all these neighborhood kids in and make it fun. And he would learn with them the Sefer Pelioites. So sometimes you see how things balance just in a tiny way, and you understand that we might be involved in a situation or relationship that is difficult or easy without yet understanding where it is, how it is part of the whole equation, where the harmony is and where the balance is. The issue then becomes how to make sure to see every situation we're in, not as an episode in and of itself, in a vacuum, but rather to take a step back and be patient and calm and always remember that this is in relationship, although I might not see it yet, to maybe events in my life that haven't happened yet, or in my children's life or grandchildren's life that haven't happened yet. Or maybe it's in relationship to something in the past, or something that's beyond me and my family, part of Am Yisrael. Everything that exists is in relationship to so much else, but we don't yet get to see how the harmony of it all. But when we do see the harmony, it just makes us feel right and comfortable, and there's something exhilarating in it. And as we go through history, store episodes play out in our lives and in history, and they start gaining intensity. And greater intensity. They're still in harmony with the past, but the intensity as we get closer and closer to the Moshe Mashiach gets greater and greater. And you see this. I brought here musical harmonies. You see this? I don't know if you can see it on the sheet. I think a piano is a very good way to understand this. All right? Can you see it? You can't really see what I tried to do here because it's not big enough. But basically, if you look at a piano keyboard, we know that we divide up what's called an octave into 7 notes, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay. What we mean when we say notes or an octave, we mean that sound, as we always speak about, is vibrations. And as the vibrations, let's say on a string, increase in frequency, okay, the sound gets a higher pitch. When you see, let's say, a piano keyboard, and you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, there's a mathematical proportion going on. If, let's say, the A in the middle of the keyboard, okay, it has a frequency of 110, okay? Say it again?
Decimals.
100, not decimals. A frequency of 110, well, when you say frequency, how many times the sound is vibrating, okay? Hertz, we call it. A frequency of 110, well, then the next A is the frequency has doubled, it's 220. And the next A, down 7 notes later, right? The next one, 8 notes later really, is 440. And so you see that as you go further along, the frequency exponentially increases. And what's really happening here is that you have a sound, its frequency is increasing, and every time you hit the double, a 2-to-1 ratio, there's a harmony. You hear it. So A at 110 and A at 220 go together because there's a ratio, mathematical connection between them that we feel. And if you hit somebody's playing and they hit a discordant note that doesn't belong and is not in a proper ratio with the note before it, it feels horrible. It feels wrong. In fact, in the ancient world, it was considered a sinful maneuver to do such a thing because it was out of sync with what we naturally are in sync with, what is naturally harmonious. As history progresses, the frequency is also increasing exponentially, meaning things that happen in the future are connected to things that happen in the past, are similar to, have relationship to, and when we see similarities, we're astonished. But as we know also, that there becomes a greater and greater intensity as history gets closer and closer, and we begin to feel in a much deeper way the connection and the synchronization. For example, how is it that today our greatest threat is coming from Iran, who wants to destroy all of the Jewish people? And the intensity and the right. We see a pattern. And the fact that there's a pattern in play means there's a harmony to all things. And the guarantee is, and what keeps us positive, that the sum total of all the components will equal one echad, as it does in the Purim story. You see? So if you look here here you could read these frequencies that are in direct ratio to each other. By the way, note that on the piano, for example, there are 7 repeating sets of the notes, okay? And the notes are just points along the increasing frequency that we've given names to, okay? But as you see, that here we have 7 sets of increasing frequencies until you're at a pitch so high, meaning frequency so large, you can't even hear it anymore. We can't hear it. Other creatures could probably hear it, but we can't hear it. 7, okay, that's the number of repetitions until it's beyond us. Hello, what is that saying? 7 times 7, 49, the 50th level. It's all, of course, connected to our Kabbalistic ideas. All right? We will eventually hear those higher frequencies, by the way. We just can't hear them yet. Now, yes, there's an 8th note. Okay. There's even more, which is without getting into it. Now, it turns out that these ratios relate to the frequency of the sounds produced. We hear the sounds because of vibrations in the air, and the rate of these vibrations is called frequency, which is measured in hertz. Higher frequencies correspond to higher pitched notes. For example, a tone of 440 hertz corresponds to the musical note 8 above the middle C, doubling, etc. Now, look at what's going on here. This is from Maseches Megillah. Did I ever tell you the best dating story ever that comes from this page in the Megillah? Or I think maybe Daf Aleph. So I have to stop here. This is story time. So I dated a guy from Lakewood, learning in Lakewood Yeshiva. And to make a long story short, there's a very funny incident where I actually, after the first date, I literally, with my father's help, I copied a piece of the Mishnah Berurah, underlined and sent it to him about something we were talking about. And he he said, do you know what I did with that? I put it on the billboard, the bulletin board in Lakewood. Say, this is what a girl who I dated sent me. Then the next date was like this. I was teaching at this Netzach Yisrael, and I had to prepare a class. And I saw something in English in the art scroll about something about Haman and Mordechai. And I said, let me look it up in the source. So the source was Megillah 13. I wasn't sure it was 13A or 13B. So I looked it up. And because I forgot, but it probably was A because I didn't see it today in my copying this, and I wrote, I put in my notes, whatever. That night I go on a date with this guy again, Nevach, and he says, I have to tell you a beautiful Dvar Torah, and it is exactly that. So after he finishes speaking, I said, yeah, Maseches Megillah Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph on the bottom. So he literally screamed. He goes, how do you know that? It was just good. It was just so perfect. Anyway, so on this page, look at what's going on here. Look at what's going on here just in terms of the harmony in place in the story, okay? The Megillah says, we mentioned this. Okay, look at the first thing, Megillah 13b, that Hashem, he talks about Paro, right? Look at the second paragraph. Similarly, Hashem caused servants to become angry with their master in order to perform a miracle for another righteous man. And who is he? It is Mordechai. With regard to the plot to kill the king, it is written, and the matter became known to Mordechai. Okay? Now, meaning that Bigsan and Teresh had this problem with Achashverosh, but that was all created, that was facilitated by God so that Mordechai should have a relationship with the king, which the king owed him something. So Bigsan and Teresh thought that this was their story. This had nothing to do with them. That had nothing to do with them. For another example of this would be relationships. David HaMelech, when he was running away from Shaul, went and hid by the Plishtim, and there was a king there who Hashem had made it that king should have a daughter who was not okay, and she was ranting and raving and screaming all day. So when David came, he acted like a ranting, raving lunatic, so to speak. So the king said, wait a second. And they said, I think that the people in there said, I think this is David. This is our enemy. This is the chief of staff of the army. That famous guy that killed Goliath. I think that's him. And the king said, are you crazy? He's a lunatic. I have enough lunatics. I don't want to hear about this. I have enough people screaming and yelling and running around. I don't even want to deal with this. So that relationship he had with his daughter was strictly to ultimately save David. Who knew that that's why the daughter was born, for that reason? But you know what? Going through life and your mission is to save David HaMelech. It's not a bad mission in life. Now, here also, people have relationships with themselves, with each other. That is part of a much greater story. Now, here, look at this, talking about the harmony in every equation. Okay? Look further. The verse describes when the rest of the events of the Megillah occurred. After these events, the Achashverosh promote Haman. The Gemara says, after what particular events? Rava says, only after the Holy One, blessed be He, created a remedy, that means Esther, for the blow, Haman's plan, and set in place the chain of events that would lead to the miraculous salvation of was Haman appointed, setting the stage for the decree against the Jews to be issued. Meaning, Shem already injected into the big equation, Esther, her position, the whole story. In there, it's called refuah before the makkah. The equation is always in balance. We just don't get to see it. We don't understand. In fact, mathematically, there are mathematical formula that scientists have discovered way before, sometimes centuries before, a practical application on Earth was discovered that was the exact expression of that mathematical formula. There are truths that exist abstractly before we realize what they apply to. Here's another example. All right, about refuah before the makkah, and then they cast a pur, that is the lot. Okay, our sages taught the following brisa. Once the lot fell in the month of Adar, Haman rejoiced greatly. He saw this was a favorable omen for the execution of his plans. He says, oh, this is the month Moshe died, time of calamity. But he did not know that not only did Moshe die, but Moshe was born. Let's talk about that for a moment and look at Torah.org. Explains this very nicely. Brings in the idea about Or and Tov and Moshe's birth, Moshe's death. Let's talk about that. Is the Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. The idea here is that Moshe brings us the Torah. The Torah tells us how to function in a way that is consistent and in sync with our purpose. And doing that leads to Or. And eventually we get to see it, and that's Vayhudim Haisa Ora. Meaning, every particular situation in life, our question really is never, why is this happening to me? Because no one's going to ever answer that question. And the real question is, how do I respond to this situation, no matter what it is? Personal illness, difficulty, loss, confusion, frustration. How do I respond to this? Knowing all the time that it is part of an equation, that is in harmony. It is in relationship to other parts of my life that might not have even happened, or like we said, our children and our grandchildren, who knows? Or maybe beyond, or maybe from before, or maybe for Am Yisrael. Being that is absolutely the case, how do I respond to the situation in a way that is consistent with my function as Tzelem Elokim? So, if it's Chas v'Shalom, a situation where I don't know what to do, and these are the ways I don't respond. I don't get angry and say why this is wrong and this should never be, and I won't tolerate it, and I'll give up everything, and I'll just get depressed and die, and This is not how we're supposed to handle anything. We're supposed to handle everything knowing it has deep meaning for us personally and in the bigger picture. And understanding that it's called Emunah. Emunah doesn't mean, my grandfather always stresses, in fact, his last discourse publicly before he was nifter was on Emunah and Bitachon, and he said, Emunah does not mean everything is going to be good. It means everything that is happening is ultimately good, and I've Bitachon that I can handle it in a way that is Tov. The only thing we can control in our life is ourselves and our capacity to relate to everything in a way that is consistent with our existence and our identity as part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and part of the story. That's what we do. That's what Moshe taught us. And so when Haman said, oh great, he died, Haman did not understand that he was also born. Rav Moshe Shapiro explains, Zechrono Livracha, and then I'm going to tell a story and call up Jenny to tell a story. Eloi Nishmas, her aunt. He didn't understand, Rav Moshe says, that Moshe's physical death was ultimately Moshe didn't die from Am Yisrael. He died physically, right, on the 7th of Adar. But what that did was, it gave birth to the Moshe or the Or in every single person, the Tov in every single person. Tzaddikim don't die. They just enter into a different mode of existence. They become part of the atmosphere, and we get their Torah, we get their strength, we get it. And once a person puts Torah out there, it doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to everybody. It becomes part of Am Yisrael. Moshe gave birth to the capacity. He was Tov, he was Or, he was the fulfillment of Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the fulfillment, and he gave us the direction through the transmission of Torah completely, without any of Moshe's personal anything getting into it. Moshe was a transmitter, that nothing was lost in translation. He understood, in the most profound way, more profound than anybody else, what the Torah was, and gave it over with all his effort, all his life, in the way that could be understood by Am Yisrael, with all its clear messages and all of its subliminal messages and deeper messages, and gave birth to the fact that we have within us Tov, the capacity to operate in sync with our purpose, which is what happened in Purim. He said, wake up everybody, re-accept the Torah. That's how we have to operate, and that's what's going to turn the tables on everything. And that is what's going to ultimately lead to Yehudim Haisa'ora. I want to tell you this story. It happened on Purim, Shushan Purim. My grandfather is very connected to Purim. He died on Purim. And the most transformative experience of his life really saved him. What happened also on Purim. It was 1936. It was actually Shushan Purim. And my grandfather, it was must have been Parshas Ki Sisa next week. And the Nazi party already was in power, and there was Gestapo spies everywhere. And that week in Shul, there was a Gestapo spy. And my grandfather was speaking about the golden calf. And it was next week, and he called the golden calf in German, as Rav Hirsch always talked about, a Vermittler, a middleman between the people and God. The Gestapo spy went and reported to the Gestapo agents that he was mocking Hitler, Vermittler, and calling him a cow. So the Gestapo called my grandfather in for an interrogation, and he showed them in the Hirsch Hebrew, in the German, the Hirsch, the cow, the Vermittler. This is all trumped up. But of course it was trumped up, because that was what they were doing. They were trying to terrorize, obviously, all the leaders of the Jewish community, which was, again, a beautiful part of the equation, because that's why my grandfather left, because he saw early, he better get out. And that's why, and he kicked Einstein out. Wasn't that a beautiful, harmonious, you see that? Comes to America, heads the Manhattan Project, makes the bomb, drops it on, unfortunately, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ends the war. Hello. Hitler could have just killed him, but he chased him out. So they called my grandfather. Now my grandfather, there was a file opened in the local office in the town of Ischenhausen by the Gestapo against my grandfather. This spy was just a shaliach from Hashem to help my grandfather understand he better get out. But there was another German in the police station who was not a Nazi. And he had a relationship with my grandfather from the past, and my grandfather helped him out and was nice to him. And when this file was opened up in the police station, Obviously, my grandfather's life was in danger, and he turned to this German to see what he could do to eliminate this file. Now, in the meantime, it took a few months for this story to play out. My grandfather slept in his suit every single night because he said that it already happened that they dragged out Jews in the middle of the night and beat them and let them die in the forest or hang them. He said the Rabbina, he was only 22 years old, will not hang in his pajamas. He slept in a suit. And finally, he would call this German every few weeks. And the German, of course, not being able to give away that he was trying to eliminate this file, would be very rough with him and call him terrible names and say, "You bother me, I have no time to talk to you, call me another time," and hang up. And this went on for months. Finally, after a few months, he called him, and the German screamed at him, cursed at him, and said, "I don't know why you're calling me. This matter is closed. I have nothing to talk about with you. I don't want you to call me ever again. I told you already it's finished. Goodbye." Once he understood that the matter was closed, he could then get a visa and try to get out of the country. And he, during this time also, another thing that really, starting prior to this, was there was a Nazi named Rudolf Meyer, a German Nazi, this is a bad guy, a German Nazi from the Hitler Youth. And he lived there, and he decided, let's terrorize this rabbi. So he'd get all his friends, and they, in the middle of the night, come screeching up with their cars. They just made life so miserable. And then this guy came with the whole Vermittler thing. And for that reason, my grandfather understood we need to leave. And unfortunately, many people didn't. They thought it would blow over, and Baruch Hashem, they were shlichim, but they didn't know it.
What year?
It was my grandfather came here right before Kristallnacht. So he left Germany in 1936, right? It was 1936. Everybody got out. Everybody got out. Everybody. Baruch Hashem. So you see, and so Purim, it was a big day of Purim. You see how, again, situations come into play that are part of a bigger story. This particularly is a Purim story where shlichim who don't know what they're messengers for. And there's so many other amazing stories about relationships and amazing stories. But I want Jenny, who has a Yartzeit, her aunt's Fatira, to also, she just mentioned, and also this kind of story, we said we'll share it.
Yeah, so it's the Shiva week of my aunt in Mexico. I just came back from Ohio and a couple of days of Shiva that I was there for.
Yeah, turn it.
And my cousins and my uncle are sitting on these cushions, very nice, comfortable looking, very low cushions, almost looks like a sofa, but it's Shiva. So how did they end up on these chairs is because my aunt, 2 months ago, in perfect health, she died very unexpectedly and very suddenly. 2 months ago, she went to pay a Shiva call in another part of the community. The communities are very separate. And she sees the Avelim that are sitting on these very comfortable looking cushions. And she walks out and she says, I want my community to have these kind of chairs for our Avelim also. They should be more comfortable. So she arranges, she gets the donor, she gets the seats and everything, and she gets it to the Chaver Kadisha, whoever sets up the Shiva house. Little knowing that, just a few weeks later,
Her family.
Providing for her own children and husband, to sit Shiva for her. It's a crazy story.
Everybody in this room, I'm sure, has a story like this. And if you look at the end of the notes, thank you, Jenny. Yes. My father, Matzel Bas Yosef Chaim. Thank you. Her neshama should have an aliyah. When you look at the end here, this is not in color. You should do this in color. Just Google it, okay? White is the sum of is a combination of all colors. When all the colors combine or intersect with each other, you get white light. Okay, you get R. When every single color in the spectrum all together combine, you get white light. Okay? This is the same idea. Look at the two psukim. Look at the psukim that are in relationship to each other, that are juxtaposed to each other here in the Megillah. Look at all the colors. Bilavush Malchus, Techeles, Bechor, Va'ateres, Zahav, a golden crown, right? Gadol, a big one, V'tachrech Butz, Va'argaman. All the colors are combining here to give Mordechai Malchus, save the Jewish people. And the next one is Vayilahudim Haisa'ora. There was R, light. The combination of all the colors becomes white light. That's the R we're talking about. V'yar Likim as R, pure, pristine, clear, white light. So we should know the main idea here is never overreact or stress or judge or give up or et cetera, because of a particular situation, no matter what it is, at a particular time. And may the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, today be for us. Esther Malka be for us, a chizuk, and we should all be filled with